This one part of the manual that I don't agree with the order, and that is to put this motor in now that the front's been put on, the servos have been put on. I don't know how you're supposed to get in there to do that, if that's the case. Because to do the screws up, you've got to come straight down exactly where the servos are. So I'm going to remove the servos and remove the battery tray, and I'll show you what I've got to do. We need to line up the pinion so it sits pretty much just where the top of the hex tool is, right there. Fit the pinion on, and slide it up through. And as you can see there, it's fairly low. So you can move the pinion up and down until you get to the right spot. So when you look at it directly on, it's just above. It's a 1.5mm hex, and as you can see, it's almost the thickness of the hex key above, just in there. As you can see there, it's flush with the top of the shaft, so that's exactly where it's going to sit. What I use is the retaining compound, Loctite 620, very high strength, very good Loctite for this particular type of job. This is fairly thick Loctite. Last thing you want is any of that Loctite to get into the motor. So I totally surround the motor with some material, something that'll soak that Loctite right up. Now if you've got a tight fitting pinion, I warn you now that when you put this on, you better be quick to position it, because it'll come off, it'll stay exactly where you put it. So you've got to be fairly quick. And my pinion's a little bit on the loose side. While I've got it in this horrible mess, I'm going to put my grub screw in, and there's enough Loctite there to hold that grub screw in position. Just going to wipe off all the excess. Now as far as I'm concerned, this now is on permanent. I won't be able to get that off without using heat. Next thing I like to do is get the bolts ready and a couple of washers. Now bolts come with the motor, but the washers don't. So I've got various size washers around, and that's what I'm using, just a couple of M3 washers. Keep looking for the tightest spot. Pretty sure you can see that there. Now there it is there. That's my tightest spot. And as you can see, I've still got a little bit of movement there. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to Loctite these into position. And as you can see, that's where my cables have come out, just up against that frame, and I've still to decide whether I'm going to go forward with the ESC or back. It just depends on the balance of the heli once I get the batteries on and everything. So it makes a little bit more sense if this is your main gear and that is your pinion, and you have a wobble that goes in this fashion, right? No gear is 100% symmetrical, right? So what you have is, let's say it comes out a little bit this way. Okay, what will happen is you're pushing that pinion in that direction. So as you're looking at the motor and the pinion sitting through the center there, and that's your motor, you're actually putting stress in this direction. So what actually happens is you start wearing, there's a bearing up here, and you start destroying this bearing here, because that bearing is getting pushed to one side and then goes back to normal, pushed to the other side and back to normal again. So you end up wearing this bearing out, and possibly even the lower bearing down the bottom here. And you don't want that situation to happen. But at the same time, you don't want it where your pinion's too far away and you start stripping your main gear. So you need to find in the wobble of the main gear against the pinion where the closest point is, and then you adjust it there so that it's almost pushing that pinion. So you get it very close, like put some paper in between it, push it up against there, tighten the pinion up, and then roll the paper out of the I meant tighten the motor up, and slip a piece of paper in there between the main gear and the pinion, tighten the bolts up while you're pushing a little bit of force against the main gear. Once they're seated correctly, roll the main gear around so that the paper comes out, and then take it back to that position again so that you can actually see if it's hard up against it or not. You do not want it hard up against it. So as you look at the teeth of the pinion, let's say they're like that, and then the main gear teeth, let's see if I can draw that, is going around like so. You want a small gap, right? So a small little gap in there, the thickness of paper, and you don't want it too far away, because at the other end where it's too loose, you'll find that actual main gear might be here, so it'll be up higher, and so there'll be a larger gap, but still enough to bite with the pinion. Okay, hope that makes sense. As you can see, there is no way that you would be able to get to the motor bolts with the servos being in place. You could probably do it with the battery tray being in place, but you might as well leave that out, because you've got to put the servos back in anyway, and there's no way you can bolt the servos in while the battery tray's there. So this is why I'm not so keen on this particular page of the build. The motor should be put in much earlier, before the servos get put in place. So as soon as your main shaft goes in, that's when the motor really should be lined up and put in place. The next part on this page talks about putting the bolts in and the main blades. So just ease the blades into place, pass the bolts through, okay.